110 million, congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been a nice week.
Talk to us about the vision of what Circle will be. It seems like you're sort of the very infrastructure of blockchain within crypto.
Right. Well, I think we're very excited about this idea of reimagining what global finance can be if there is such a thing as an internet for finance. Mm-hmm. And in the same way that we're all connected to one another directly over the internet of content, what does it mean for capital formation and fundraising and payments and selling our goods and services globally if we can be connected safely in such a way for finance?
So you already have a way that I can send money, the payment solution that you already have. There's a way I can invest. There's a way I can trade crypto, some of the products that you have. But what's really interesting and got everyone talking is this so-called stable coin that you're bringing out, the USDC. It's going to be a token, so a cryptocurrency, but underpinned by the US dollar. Why is this so important to the cryptocurrency space?
Well, one of the things that's interesting to us is how do we take fiat money and put it on blockchains? How do we get the benefit of things like public blockchain infrastructure, which might underpin something like an HTTPS of money, so to speak? How do we leverage those things with the dollar and with euro and with sterling, with fiat money? At the same time, there's a problem with using existing crypto assets for things like payment and settlement, and they're very volatile. Yeah. So it makes sense to have something like a US dollar represented as a token that can transfer anywhere in the world, to any digital wallet in the world, any exchange that can support this token.
One of the desires is the efficiency, is the speed of transaction, but you're using the Ethereum blockchain. There is issue with scale. There's issue with the speed in which you can send these sorts of crypto assets. So when will that be solved? When will we really strike that sort of efficiency by putting the dollar on a blockchain? Right.
Well, for those settlements that require higher throughput, we're also working on other solutions to increase that throughput. There are really three fundamental issues that we're trying to address here. One is stability. Mm-hmm. That's a very immediate need that we have today. The other is throughput. How do we make things faster? How do we scale? And then the other is governance. How do we do this in a way that can further a standard with multiple members, not just one new member of the network, but multiple members of a network that all participate together in a new ecosystem.
Talk to me about the stability and the governance, because there is another key stable coin, so-called out there, Tether, which is meant to be underlying with US dollar pegged to it, but there hasn't been much vindication or clarity that really for every Tether out there is a US dollar sat there somewhere. How are you going to prove that you have got the dollar assets somewhere that will keep the stability of the USDC?
Well, there are many interesting experiments out there in the stablecoin space, but it's really imperative that the entity that governs the network, that verifies that there are in fact funds sitting behind these tokens, that also governs network membership and makes sure that all entities are behaving, is separate from any one of those entities that is issuing these tokens. So there will be a separate network, not Circle specifically, but a separate network that multiple participants can participate in, and that will provide full auditing, full transparent solvency protections for everyone who uses it.
This is going to be called Center.
That is Center, yes.
And Bitmain, which has led the investment, most recent Series E, the Bitcoin mining company, is going to be part of it. But who else is going to be part of it? What other banks are already excited, for example?
Banks are very interested in this. Bitmain is the one that we're talking about this week. As you say, they've led this investment in Circle specifically. They're also joining the Center network, and they will be helping to facilitate additional members in that network. Bitmain is a very interesting company. They're one of the core infrastructure providers of Bitcoin specifically, but also blockchain networks at large. And so they're a key participant in the Center network, and also obviously a strategic partner for Circle now.
We had recently many a Fed member. The central banks have been interested by crypto in particular, and we've had Federal Reserve members coming forward saying, look, I don't understand why we would need a central bank issued crypto. So how are they reacting to the fact that you want to put the very US dollar onto a digital token?
Well, there are banks that are very interested in helping this to happen. And their perspective is that partly this is just an improvement for the infrastructure, the rails that ferry dollars into euros, into sterling, and so on around the world. We need a replacement for something like SWIFT. There's also opportunity to do much more, and that these tokens can pay into things like smart contracts that govern the delivery of funds in a much more efficient way than, say, an English contract enforced by a court, as these smart contracts are software code that is enforced by a distributed computer that spans the world. And I think the banks, as well as technology companies, are particularly fascinated by this idea. This is the future of the internet of money.
But as the central banks oversee it, so too do regulators. How are you having conversation with regulators, and are the conversations going in the right direction?
They are. It's very important that we do this the right way, clearly. And when we look at existing licensure on the regulatory side, there's a little bit of a square peg, round hole issue. And the regulators regulators are, to their credit, coming up to speed with the increasing sophistication that we're seeing in the token space, and addressing it in ways that we hope ultimately will lead to innovation globally, even though right now much of the regulation is driven by what the United States is doing.
So you talked about how the dollar, the euro, the pound, you look to facilitate onto a digital token. I know before you've said perhaps not Asian currencies because there's a lot of competitors already over in the Asian space. What's your vision in terms of what Circle will provide? Will it be that would it just be that digital tokens can live alongside fiat currency and you can transact with them, whether it's face-to-face, but also over computer-to-computer?
I think ultimately everything of value will be tokenized. So that includes currencies, that includes all kinds of fiat currencies, and that involves multiple issuers of the same kinds of currencies. Circle certainly shouldn't be the only issuer of USDC. There should be more who issue that. There should also be other kinds of tokens that represent potentially anything of value, whether they be physical goods, real estate, whether they be baskets of goods. Everything ultimately of value, we believe, will be tokenized. And when you pay into or pay out of those kinds of smart contracts, you want those to be stable coins.
But the irony to me, Sean, it seems, is that the utopia for many of those that want to see decentralization is that we automatically have to have centralization to get there. You have to have exchanges, by which then centralize it to a certain extent. And many don't want to see central banks and currency issued by central banks at all, but you're looking at tokenizing the currencies that are issued by central banks. Is this a stepping stone to the utopia, or do you see a different type of utopia?
I think we see a little more of a hybrid world. There is room for centralization as super nodes on a network, just as there is also much room for decentralization and nodes that are pure peers. And those can interoperate with one another directly, just as you and I can send one another a photo directly, but we might also use something like Instagram to view photos that is more of a central service on the network. It's a rough analogy, it's not perfect, but if we have an internet of finance, it's likely that some services will be centralized and others more decentralized. It will regardless be more evenly distributed and much more inclusive than the global financial system we have today.
Sean, you've just come back from Manhattan. You said you've had a good week. Obviously, you've announced the funding. You've also probably been partying. From what I can see, the consensus event that was happening in Manhattan was quite a crazy event. There was a huge gathering of all those in cryptocurrency in Manhattan, going from conference to conference, party to party. What was going on there? I mean, it felt like there was a lot of champagne being sprayed and Snoop Dogg rapping, but is there style and substance at the moment, or is it just style? I
was not privy to any rapping with Snoop Dogg personally.
Shame.
No, I think it's his loss. I think, no, there is a lot of substance there beneath some of the glitter. I think when we started this company 5 years ago, my co-founder and I attended conferences that were a dozen people in a small meetup, and now those conferences have grown to include institutional investors and very serious players, whether they be in regulatory, banking, tech, or startups.